All right, here we go. So, Scott, we all set and ready to go?
Good to go.
All right. So, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Just so if everyone wasn't on last week, what we'll do, we've got kind of a list of questions people submitted in advance. Once we get through those, we'll open it up. If anyone's got any other questions, maybe a question came to you through this discussion. Like I said, you'll get a chance to ask them. And then, as I said, I'll record this and share the recording with you as well. Just so everyone knows, our goal each time we do this is to try to make it a little bit different. While some of the basics of nutrition will always be the same, Scott and I have a lot of plans in mind, just as far as like different things that we can talk about, not only from a nutrition standpoint, but also in regards to changing habits and implementing change around nutrition. So that, like I said, we want to try to keep this as as beneficial as possible to all of you. So, all right, let's go ahead and Scott, let's just start knocking these questions right out. So, first question from Julie is, what are some strategies to combat the cortisol reaction to craving sugar and salt from emotional stress? She'd love to stop snacking needlessly and would welcome any advice. So what do you got for Julie?
This is a tricky one. So there's a number of things you can do, but ultimately, I think trying to get down to, why are you snacking? Is it really due to stress or boredom? But some things you can do to help lower cortisol and limit snacking is trying to identify first the times of the day that tends to be the biggest issue. Is it sitting at the desk? Is it late at night? Once you kind of identify the issue, um, eating high fiber foods so that you're really just not feeling really hungry between meals is definitely going to help keep you satiated a little bit longer, as well as eating good, clean protein sources will help you feel a little bit fuller longer. Um, Trying to manage your blood sugar also will definitely help. So trying to avoid those big peaks and valleys, eating a bunch of just sugary foods or things that are going to bring the blood sugar up to a really high level and then result in a big crash shortly after. Things like that are definitely going to trigger some snacking. So again, just high fiber foods. Um, an example of those could just be more fruits and veggies. If snacking like at the desk or at work seems to be the issue, um, get rid of all the stuff, all the junk, the chocolate. Make sure that the stuff's just not around, so that the foods that you are grabbing are, fruits and veggies, yogurt, cheese sticks, stuff like that. Just make sure you stock up and have a lot of those available. Sleep also plays a really big role. And it's pretty easy to say, well, you should get a little more sleep, but it's a lot easier said than done. But just trying to put the phone down, a couple hours or an hour before you go to bed and make sure you're getting good quality sleep because that definitely will uh, increase cortisol.
Okay. All right, let's unpack that a little bit because we you just covered a lot.
There was a
All right.
lot.
As far as one of the first things that you said that I really liked was to identify the problem areas. What do you have any specific strategies around that? Or is it like would it be keeping a food journal or keeping just a journal in general as far as how you're feeling or just looking for opportunities that maybe you're falling off the wagon? What would you suggest if that was something like the first step that someone wanted to take?
I do like a food journal. I know it's a love hate. It can be really useful. A lot of people really don't like doing that, but I find it really helpful. In the past, I have used MyFitnessPal for long periods of time. It's going to make you think twice if you know that if you actually are entering everything into the app. or if you're going to write down everything you eat, it's going to make you think twice. You're like, well, I'm going to have to put it in or write it down. Just taking a moment of pause before acting on uh, on that is really helpful.
Okay, so keeping a food journal obviously is kind of a best case scenario, but none of us like doing that. So at least do something, you're saying, to raise your awareness to, well, when are the times that I'm really falling off the wagon? Does that sound right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and then another strategy I actually like a lot. I've started doing this. I have a sweet tooth as well. Um, Mine tends to be at night. Brush my teeth, um, eat dinner, have a little something, like a little piece of chocolate, like a little dove, or something that's portion controlled, and you're not just tearing open a big bag of chocolates. Um, Enjoy it, treat yourself, and then brush your teeth. That really has saved me many times because if you eat, then you're gonna have to brush teeth again. But it's enough to make you think twice before acting on that again.
It's funny how something so simple, just the thought of brushing your teeth twice, nobody wants to do that, and something that simple can really make a difference. I think that's great. You then talked about getting rid of the bad snacks and making it easy. So a lot of this sounds just like what we talk about a lot, just the fundamentals of habit change, and it's make the bad stuff or the stuff that you're trying to avoid more difficult to get to, and make the good stuff, the healthier snacks easier to do or to remove as much friction as possible. Anything you'd want to add kind of on that and just forming those either stopping those bad habits or forming the good habits?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think creating awareness and identifying the problem is really it'll go a long way.
Okay. All right. And then last question to this, you mentioned like, all right, high fiber, high protein. What would, if we're thinking something relatively convenient, what are your go-tos? What do you recommend to clients on a daily basis?
Yeah. So this kind of leads into another one of the questions that somebody submitted. I can send this out, but I just made a short list of uh, healthy snacks, and it's kind of broken down by category. So there's just right off the top, starting with some dairy snacks. I know some people eat dairy, some people don't, but Greek yogurt, talking about protein, it's going to fill you up a little bit more than the regular yogurt that's just loaded with a bunch of sugar. That's essentially pudding. Um, Cottage cheese is great, really convenient. There's really no prep involved in that at all, and you can portion it out, take it with you. Cheese sticks, low fat cheese sticks, like string cheese. Those are great. And you're looking at 6, 7 grams of protein um, a piece, which is equivalent to about an ounce of meat. So that's awesome. Um, then eggs, hard boiled eggs are awesome. They're uh, easy to prepare and you can take them anywhere you go. Or like the egg muffins, I can share a recipe also. So an actual muffin, but like essentially anything you would put in an omelet and then like in a muffin tin. Those are great. You can prepare like several days worth ahead of time, or even just uh, deli meat. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy. You can just get some good quality like turkey or chicken. Um, Kind of going down to like plant-based options. Edamame, hummus would be a really good option with carrots, celery, peppers, all that kind of stuff. Uh, those all have fiber. They're going to help fill you up and keep you satisfied for a longer period of time. You're not going to get those crashes with the blood sugar. Um, Protein bars could be a good option. Um, Nuts and seeds, even rice cakes. They make several different flavors now. They even make mini ones. Uh, they have the convenience of chips, but they're a lot better than chips. Um, yeah, I'll share this. I think it could be helpful.
Yeah, we'll definitely. I made a note. We'll send that out to everyone. All right, that's great stuff. All right, what next question from Lisa. What are the best protein sources for preserving muscle and staying full?
Yeah. So a lot of the same ones that were on that list that I just mentioned, um, really any kind of animal protein is going to do the job. The trick there is just making sure if it's like beef or pork, for example, that you're just not going crazy and getting tons and tons of calories from the fat. So if it is beef or pork, just get the leaner cuts,
Mhm.
like pork tenderloin versus pork steaks. Pork tenderloin's super lean. Pretty much, there's not really any marbling in it, so you can pretty much trim the fat right off before you even cook it. Um, but chicken, fish, if you're looking for like grab and go type options, if you are a fan of tuna, the grab and go like tuna packets that aren't even in cans, you just rip them open, you're good to go. They're already flavored, they're cheap, they're convenient. Those are fantastic. And I wouldn't shy away from protein shakes or protein bars either. Uh, at the end of the day, even a lesser quality protein bar is going to be a hell of a lot better than something sweet, candy, chocolate, that kind of stuff. I think those are a really, really awesome, convenient snack that you can just take and go anywhere. Um, Cottage cheese, I mentioned, you can put cottage cheese in eggs. You can put it in a lot of recipes too. You can use that as a substitute for like creams in certain recipes. It could be a really good option. John, what am I missing?
I mean, you're covering a little bit of everything. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
I,
I thought, yeah, that's great. One thing that I would add, you earlier commented on hard-boiled eggs. I've recently become obsessed with because there's nothing worse than trying to peel hard-boiled eggs. Very frustrating. We've started buying them from Sam's in a big bag, and they're already peeled and come in two per pouch. I love it. Alicia's not wild about it, but for she's just just not into it. But I love it, and it is insanely convenient. Just grab them. I'm pretty sure I will never peel a hard-boiled egg again. So again, she's not a fan, but I think it's great. So
that's the thing. At the end of the day, you just have to try to pick and choose a few that you're okay with and that you actually enjoy eating. If you don't enjoy eating hard-boiled eggs or cottage cheese or yogurt or whatever it is, you're not going to stick to the plan. And it, you don't have to be perfect, but if you at least have a game plan, you're going to be fine.
mhm. Yeah, only other thing I would add to that is if it's a flavor issue, like I don't love this or I don't love that, there's a ton of amazing seasonings out there, like Mrs. Dash and other things that are you've got sodium-free seasonings out there that can really help out with that if it's more of an acquired taste or something that you're just not in love with. So, one follow-up to that question that I think was great. How much protein should an active person over 40 aim for per meal?
I would say at least 20 to 30 will definitely do the job. And that really will just come down to how many meals are you having in a day. If you're the type of person that doesn't really eat breakfast and your first meal is lunch, you probably want to shoot for the higher end. You could even do 40 or 50 if you're only eating a couple times a day. Um, Ideally, meals would be spread out throughout the day, every few hours. If you're eating, let's say every 3, 4 hours, like breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, eating around the workouts, that kind of stuff, and then having dinner, then it doesn't have to be a whole lot of 15, 20 grams, and you'll be just fine. An example of that is, 15, 20 grams, that's like 3 ounces of meat. It's not like the bro bodybuilder mentality of like 10 ounces of chicken at every meal. It
Sure.
doesn't have to be that. And these meals don't have to be actual meals either. Again, if you're on the go constantly, kids, just really hectic work life, and you don't really have time to sit down and eat a real meal, that's where the convenient options like cheese sticks, eggs, yogurt, um, stuff like that can come in real, real useful.
Yeah, when you say it doesn't have to be a full meal, the first thing that popped into my head was like we do a lot of the 000 Greek yogurt that I think is like 15 grams or 18 grams per serving or per individual container. So yeah, that just kind of reiterates your point. It doesn't have to be like a full meal at all. So to go back to the question, as far as how much protein should a person aim for per meal, you're suggesting uh, typically about 20 grams. However, you should more base it on, well, what's your total protein intake goal, and then divide that by however many times you're going to eat. So that's how you would come up with what an appropriate target would be for each individual. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if this is a good excuse to hop on the InBody machine, if you haven't gotten on the InBody in a while, the lean body mass number on the InBody on the sheet that it prints out is a pretty good estimate of how much you should be shooting for in a day. If you're not quite getting all the way up to that number, then some of these options could really come in handy, or even just a protein shake during a time of the day. If you're like, well, I'm not really that hungry, but I know I need to get a little bit more protein, just have a protein shake, make it easy. It's not really going to fill you up. But I would take that number and then divide it by the number of meals you typically have in a day.
Okay, I think that's a great reminder for anyone that hasn't in a while. We've got an in-body machine at every one of our locations. We would suggest for accuracy, you definitely want to do it before you work out. You don't need to schedule it. You can just come on in. Get there 2, 3 minutes early before you normally would. Like I said, it's extremely quick. But that at the very top of it, it has that lean body mass number, which Scott was saying, is a great target as far as what your protein intake should be. It's also on there. You'll find the basal metabolic rate number, which can help you determine, well, about how many calories am I burning on a daily basis. So, it's a great tool to not only track your progress, but it's also a great tool just to help you figure out and dial in your nutrition. So again, you don't need to schedule it. You could do it as early as tomorrow if you want when you're, next time you're in the gym. So just something to keep in mind if you're wanting to get a better idea of what your nutrition should, what are some good targets to aim for. All right. Next question. I really like this one, Scott. How can I manage cravings and emotional eating as I get older? And this is a two-part question. Are there any specific nutrients or foods that will help reduce cravings?
Yeah, this kind of piggybacks a little bit on some of the stuff that we just talked about, but some of the foods that will help reduce cravings. I think step one is trying to make sure that you're avoiding the big peaks and crashes throughout the day with your blood sugar. That will lead to getting hungry really fast. Typically, if that's happening, you're having sugary foods that aren't really going to fill you up for that long, and then you're going to be kind of searching around looking for stuff to pick on in between meals. So I think step one, making sure that you're getting enough fiber per day and enough protein per day. We already hit on protein. Fiber, I think, kind of flies under the radar for most people. It doesn't really, like, people know that they should be getting fiber, but they don't really think about how much, or what foods are good fiber sources. Um, but making sure that you're getting 25, 30, maybe 35 grams of fiber in a day, I think will go a long way in combating cravings. Um, if you're not sure what's a good fiber source, generally, most plants have a good amount of fiber. If it's a packaged food, though, um, if it if you ever look at food packages and it says good source of fiber somewhere on the package, if it has at least 2 grams of fiber or more per, I think, 100 or 120 calories in a serving, then they're legally allowed to claim that it's a good source of fiber. Um, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. just also look at the sugar and make sure that it's not 2 grams of fiber with 30 grams of sugar. That's, fiber will help regulate the blood sugar to combat cravings, but if it has a ton of sugar in it, along with a little bit of fiber, um, like some granola bars and stuff like that, where it looks healthy, but they still sneak quite a bit of sugar into, you're still going to get, high, those peaks and valleys.
Okay. All right. Great. Just kind of sticking on this protein theme, but I love this question. How do I know if a food is high in protein? Because I think, what you just made a comment on, legally companies can say a lot more, can probably, we might argue, mislead consumers a little bit. So, what do you define as a food being high in protein, or what would you look at to determine like, hey, you know what, this is what you would consider a high protein food?
Yeah, there's obviously the foods that you're going to look at, and intuitively, it's going to be really high in protein, like your meats and certain dairy products and um, stuff like that are clearly protein. But if it's a packaged food that like let's say a granola bar or some protein bars that say protein bar in the box, but maybe they're not really a good source of protein. If it's a bar or any kind of like single serving package, uh, ideally more than 10. Um, like peanut butter, for example, you know, gets a kind of, I guess, like reputation of being a protein source. It's not. It's a fat source with some protein in it. It's got to have 6, 7 grams of protein per serving, which is about 2 tablespoons. Um, it's not really enough for the calories that you get. So ideally over 10. Um, but then also just make sure that you're looking at the fat content and then the sugar content. It should have, if it's a good protein source, it should have more protein than anything else.
So you're saying you would look at where is the majority of calories coming from, and are there more calories coming from protein versus carbs or fat, and that might be something to consider when deciding if a food's high protein or not.
Right. Like, for example, like a certain granola bars, they may say protein bar on the actual box, but you're looking at 6, 7, or maybe even as low as 5 grams of protein, but they still have like 30 grams of carbohydrates in them. And so I wouldn't really consider that a high protein food. It's just marketing, essentially.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. Looking at, so, if you want to know something's high protein, look at like where the majority of the calories coming from. And if there's more calories coming from protein, then you're probably safe, or, that's something you would consider high protein. And if not, maybe not your best choice. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah.
All right. How can I improve digestion and gut health for better energy and fat loss?
Yeah. There's a lot to this one. And this is one that is really pretty simple at its core, but I think has kind of exploded in the last 5 years or so with the supplement industry and just various products, and people just looking to make money essentially. Um, but you don't have to take anything, you don't have to buy any supplements. Really, just making sure that, again, it comes down to the basics. Um, you're getting enough protein, you're getting enough fiber. Fermented foods are awesome. There's a lot of fermented foods that maybe you wouldn't even realize are actually fermented. Um, a good example could be like kefir, instead of uh, just drinking like milk or other dairy products. Um, Great for your gut, but also making sure you're staying hydrated, getting enough protein, managing your stress, and getting enough sleep, good quality sleep at night goes a long way as well.
Okay, so you're saying as far as improving your digestion, um, the food does matter, but stress and sleep, and there's a lot of other factors that definitely come into play as well that you wouldn't want to completely ignore.
Yeah, and certain foods, like I'm not against processed foods. I don't think they're terrible. They're great for convenience, but making sure that the majority of the food that we eat looks like you can grow it or kill it, essentially, and not to the paleo extreme, but eating foods that are really high in sodium and have tons and tons of additives and are really high in sugar do lead to inflammation. Foods that are packed with a bunch of saturated fat, stuff like that, just like we know intuitively that it's not that great for us, but it does play a role and it does cause inflammation. And just eating more fiber, more greens, more fruits and veggies will definitely help.
Okay. All right. Got just a couple left here, and then we'll open it up if anyone else has questions. How much water should I be drinking daily, and does hydration impact fat loss?
Yeah. So there are a lot, like if you were to Google this question, you're going to get a lot of different answers, similar to if you were to Google, like, how much protein do I need in a day? You're going to get 10 different answers. A really, really simple way is essentially your urine should look like a post-it note or maybe a little bit lighter shade than like a standard yellow post-it note. If you're peeing out orange Gatorade, you need to be drinking more water. Um, it doesn't have to be clear all the time, and you can overhydrate. But that's the simplest way. How many times are you peeing in a day? If you're only taking a couple bathroom breaks during a 10-hour workday, you need to be drinking more water. Um, I'm not sure if I find that helpful, but if they're looking for other specifics, um, as far as hydration and fat loss, it it definitely will help with performance, being able to push yourself in the gym, being able to recover from those activities. Um, it, I don't think is really going to lead to fat loss in itself, but it's just a one part in an overall healthy lifestyle that everybody should be doing.
So you're talking about hydration and the importance on performance in the gym and just being more active, having more energy. So you would say technically no, hydration doesn't really affect fat loss, but indirectly, yes, it is one of the things that you would want to improve.
Yeah, and this also depends on the type of sweater that you are. Some people don't sweat, and other people, like, they're just working out side by side doing the same stuff, and they're just pouring sweat. There's also a whole spectrum of whether or not you're a salty sweater or not really a salty sweater. Like if you ever cool down, your clothes are wet, and then you see like those white spots around the armpits or around your shirt collar. You're probably a pretty salty sweater, and so making sure that you're hydrating even a little bit more than other people is going to be really useful.
Okay. All right. I've got one more question here, and then we'll open it up. What are some realistic expectations? This is a two-part question. What are some realistic expectations for weight loss and body composition changes at this stage of life? And then the second part to that was how does the timeline for fat loss change compared to younger years?
Yeah. Um, this is dependent on how much weight the individual has to lose. Um, if they, let's say, for example, had 50, 70 pounds to lose, you could certainly do it at a faster rate. If you're talking 5, 10 pounds away from the goal weight, um, it'll make a big difference. But in general, we talked about this a little bit last week, as far as metabolism and setting realistic expectations as we age. Um, the metabolism does slow down with age, especially 60 plus, from like 30 to 60, there's not inherently a big drop off, but the kind of summarizing from last week, um, really the biggest changes in metabolism really just come down to the fact that we just stop moving. We're not as active. There is that natural loss in muscle mass as we age, sarcopenia. And so just making sure that you're staying on top of strength training, being consistent in your routine to help combat that. Um, but that also, there's a feedback loop. The more, like, on one hand, you want to stop the muscle loss, but if you can get it going the other way to the point where you're starting to see those numbers increase on the in body, um, muscle is a lot more metabolically active, and the more muscle you have, the more calories you're going to burn in general, which leads to making fat loss just a little bit easier. Um, a good rule of thumb, though, when you are looking at the in-body numbers, for somebody that has a moderate amount of weight to lose, 0.5%, 1% month over month, for the body fat percentage is is a pretty good rule of thumb. It's realistic. It basically, you have to be burning more calories than you're consuming to achieve that. But it's not like the 6 week challenge or like biggest loser mentality of like, hey, we're going to lose 30 pounds this month. You're still going to be eating enough calories to support training and recovery. Um, and also hopefully seeing the muscle mass increase, or hopefully just not start dropping. Um, but yeah, it ultimately depends on how much you had to lose.
Okay. All right. Those are the questions that I was asked in advance. I'm going to hop to the chat. Now, if anyone would like, you can unmute yourself, ask the question, or if you'd rather throw in the chat, by all means, go right ahead. But Stephanie asked, and I really like this question, are there any specific protein bars that you should avoid?
Yes, and I'm blanking on some of the names because I never buy them. They're the ones you see at the gas station. Um, the Robert John Robert Irvine, is that his name? I think it's
Yes,
called, is
yes.
it Crunch or
I believe it's Crunch. Yes.
I think it is. I'll double check, but that's a good example, and there's a lot of them like this, so it's a good one to use as an example. But they have tons of saturated fat. So when you're looking at the nutrition label, first look and make sure it has at least 15 grams of protein. Um, if it does, you're headed down the right path. But look at the total fat and then the saturated fat content. That bar in particular, I want to say, has more than like 10 grams of saturated fat, which is crazy for something that's marketed as a healthy product. So look at the saturated fat, and then also look at the sugar. And this is where it gets a little tricky. A lot of manufacturers use sugar alcohols because they don't count towards the total added sugar content. Um, the a lot of them are going to have 10 plus grams of sugar alcohols, but making sure that the total sugar content is, let's say, under 10 grams for sure. It definitely should be a much lower number than the total grams of protein in the bar.
Yeah. It was what you're referring to. I looked it up real quick. It's the Fit Crunch.
Thick crunch.
Fit Crunch is one. Also, that comes to mind is the old Gatorade protein bars that um, have more sugar in them than protein. That's another big one. I think a lot of what you said really just goes back to to what you talked about. What is a high protein food, and is there more calories from protein than carbs and fat and but you're right. Yeah, a lot of these are just loaded with carbs and sugar. And Allison mentioned in the chat the Kind bars. I believe those have like 5 grams of protein, I think. But on the label it says high protein.
Yeah.
So they're definitely um, I know the Cliff Bars is another similar example. It's much, much higher in carbs than protein. And I'm a big fan of the Power Crunch, which it's not healthy at all, but they taste great. But if I want an
Candy
unhealthy
bar.
snack, yeah, they're great. They taste great, but yeah, probably not good for you.
So I think really just becoming an educated consumer, um, the non-sexy answer is really important. So Quest bars have, I think, depends on the flavor, but I think the chocolate chip one, I like those. Have about 9 grams of fat, but the majority of that fat is coming from almonds. They use like almond flour, and so it's not, just loaded with a bunch of, saturated fat and stuff that's not good for you.
Okay, that's great. That's great stuff. Anyone else have any other questions they'd like to chat about or anything? Looks like I think everything in the chat has been covered. But anything you want more specifics around? If you do, like I said, feel free to speak up or fire your questions away.
Hi, can you give us your opinion on whey protein, creatine, and collagen?
Yeah. Um, Whey protein is awesome. Um, so w any kind of whey protein generally is going to be a little more beneficial than vegetarian or like vegan protein sources or protein powders. It's just a higher quality protein, and you're going to get more bang for your buck essentially. So it's more that type of protein's more bioavailable. Basically, just means that your body is going to be able to utilize more per gram compared to like pea protein and other plant-based proteins. So whey is awesome. Um, you have to be careful. What I would do is just you could even like our alloy protein's awesome. You don't have to buy it from us. You could even go and get some cheap stuff from Sam's or Costco, as long as it's not loaded up with a bunch of sugar. But they're generally not. Um, you the reason I said you have to be careful, there's some whey proteins that are really, really expensive and they're cold filtered and it's whey protein isolate and which is all good stuff. But for the average person, it it's really not that necessary. There's essentially whey protein isolate and whey protein concentrate are the two main kinds of whey protein that you're going to see on a label. Whey protein concentrate's fine. We're not world class athletes or bodybuilders. It's totally fine. So get the cheaper stuff as long as it's not loaded up with a bunch of sugar, and they're generally not. Um, Creatine is awesome. Um, there's really not a downside to taking creatine other than a small number of people report like GI distress, bloating, stuff like that. It does make you retain a little bit more water, um, but the benefits are uh, it does lead to strength gains, and it's not something that you're necessarily going to feel working if you start taking it. But basically, what it does is it gets stored in your muscles, and there's good food sources of creatine too. This is just it helps you get there a lot faster. Um, but creatine basically is your body's first line fuel source for any kind of explosive, short duration, like 10 seconds or less, kind of activity. So strength training obviously falls in that category. Sprinting, stuff like that. Short explosive movements, it basically tops off your body's storage of that so it has more available and ready to go um, for those activities. So again, you're not going to really notice it working, but what it will do is it'll help you get one or two extra reps, which over time can compound and have big changes down the road.
Okay, good stuff. All right. Carol asked in the chat, is there any way to target belly fat?
Not necessarily, and it's we get that a lot where people are like, I just want to focus on my belly fat or like, back of the triceps, that kind of stuff. Um, you can't necessarily just target one particular area, but just making sure that you have all the other bases covered. You're in a caloric deficit for a long enough period of time to actually see the scale start to move in the right direction, and that you are strength training and being physically active. So you can't necessarily just target fat in one area, but just lowering your total body fat percentage, you'll see those areas start to shrink as well.
All right. So as far as targeting belly fat, you're saying blame your parents for your genetics and it's going to come off where it's going to come off in the order.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments or anything else anyone like us to discuss before we wrap this up?
And before everybody goes, give us feedback. Let us know if you find this helpful. Send us your questions. If there's things that you had a question on that I may have missed or was busy rambling and didn't actually answer your question, let me know. I'm happy to follow up.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. As I said in the beginning, we want to make this as valuable as possible. So we've got a lot of ideas in mind as far as talking about just habit change and other areas that will contribute to making things just helping everyone be more successful. So to wrap this up, a couple of takeaways that really stood out to me. To summarize, InBody, it's a great tool to figure out how much protein you need. A great tool to figure out your basal metabolic rate. You mentioned, paying attention and identifying the times that you crave sugar. It's really great to raise your awareness to when those times are coming. As far as setting an appropriate body fat goal, as far as decreasing body fat, 1/2 to 1% per month is generally pretty reasonable. A lot of factors can vary that, but that's a pretty realistic goal for most folks. And then make sure, as far as identifying high sources of protein bars or other snacks, make sure there's more protein in it than carbs and fats. Make sure the majority of there's more calories from protein than in carbs or fats. So thank you all so much for joining us on this Monday evening. Our next time doing this, I should have looked the date up. I believe it is April 7th, but you'll get a notification about it on this list. If you're watching this, you'll get a notification about it. Again, we're going to cover some different topics, and thank you all so much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon, and you'll get the recordings very soon as well. So have a great evening. Thank you.